Very good evening, and thanks for clicking on to the first European outlook of the working week and also the first European outlook of meteorological winter. A warm welcome and thanks for clicking on. Hope you're all safe and well wherever you are. Before we continue with today's video, be sure to hit that like button, share with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. We are going to look back a little bit at November. Also, we're going to look at the ideas for December. But before we even continue with that, it looks as if there's hints of something a lot colder than what was even initially anticipated here on Marfogan Weather for next week. So it's going to be an interesting one. The ECM, WF, GFS, Met Office model, all kind of showing quite a chilly look towards next week with prospects of snow, believe it or not, as well. We're back in the cold air. We did see some snow over higher road routes during the course of today. Temperatures at 14.9 yesterday here at Marfogan Weather HQ. Today, not any higher than 5 Celsius. So we continue with this weather whiplash, this yo-yo in temperatures. But November. This was what was forecasted by myself back at the end of October for the month of November. Mild, dry first half, colder, wetter second half, but average to slightly above average temperatures overall for the UK and Ireland. Colder than average for the far east and east-southeast of Europe. Potential for a couple of named storms. So this is the Met Office press release for November, a month of two halves. So we did have the mild, dry, gloomy first half of the month. Remember, we had the anticyclonic gloom. We did see temperatures as high as 17.9 on the 7th of November on the Murray coast at Kinloss due to the Fern effect. We've seen Northern Ireland, particularly mild start to the month, at daily minimum temperatures at Magilligan, County Londonderry on the 7th of November was just 0.3 short of the highest minimum temperature for Northern Ireland ever recorded in the month of November, which stands at 14.5 Celsius, which is quite interesting. You can see this graphic here. Let's blow this up just real quick to make it just a little bit easier for you to hopefully see. But certainly a very interesting one in terms of the contrast between the first half of the month and the second half of the month. But this graphic here really stands out in terms of rainfall. Very little in the way of rain all the way up until the midway point of the month. Barely any rain. And then we've seen quite a significant second half of the month in terms of rainfall amounts. But the overall month as it stands, slightly above average. In fact, it's 0.1 Celsius above the long-term meteorological average. Northern Ireland has been particularly warm, which means with the mean of 7.5, which is only 0.8 Celsius above the long-term November average. A warm month, particularly for Northern Ireland and the southwest of both Wales and England, as well as western Scotland. Parts of the Cairngorm region actually warmer than average. The Outer Hebrides and the west coast of Scotland as well, but the rainfall very much drier than average. A few spots wetter than average across southeast Wales, South Midlands, for example. But generally speaking, it's been a dry November overall. So not a bad forecast overall in terms of both temperature as well as precipitation for the autumn as a whole. It was dry north and quite wet south. Obviously, the first half of autumn was particularly wet across England and Wales with a record wet September. In terms of the mean temperature, very close to average for the autumn as a whole. Met Office says temperatures for the autumn for the UK has been above average, which with the mean being 9.92 Celsius, which is 0.2 above the long-term meteorological average. So just slightly warmer than average overall. We've seen some significant cold shots. We also seen some quite significant mild periods as well. But generally speaking, we did have the snowiest period for the month of November since 2010, which is quite interesting. I know a couple of snide remarks back earlier on saying, it's crazy to say 2010. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't going for a 2010 in terms of cold. But some of the outbreaks that we've seen has been particularly noteworthy. And it's been an interesting autumn, I must admit, from a temperature and rainfall point of view. Looking at the upcoming, so we'll look at the details in terms of December in a second, But look at this here. This is off the GFS ensemble. The upcoming 5 days: cold Scotland, warmer England, Wales, and Southern Ireland. Slightly colder than average across Northern Ireland, as can be seen here. But play through this loop, you can see that we have got quite a cool shot coming down from the north as we progress through the 7 through 11 day time frame. This is the 6 to 10, and then we moderate things as we move towards the period 12th through the 17th of December. In terms of precipitation for the upcoming 7-day period, looks like this here. So we are slightly wetter than average across north and eastern areas, drier across more southwestern UK as well as Ireland. Also, looking ahead as we play through, you can see here that we actually have a slightly drier signal showing up for the mid-month period. In terms of this is interesting, right? So this is obviously the mean zonal winds. There's two ways to measure the strength of the polar vortex, one being the temperature at the core, and the second being the winds surrounding the polar vortex. The stronger those winds around the polar vortex, the stronger the vortex is itself. We've got a major Arctic outbreak into the eastern side of North America, and we're seeing record-breaking or near record-breaking snowfall downwind of the Great Lakes. But the polar vortex is expected to become quite strong, but there is quite a persistent showing now on the model ECM. This is, by the way, ECMWF. There is quite a distinct drop-off in the strength of the mean zonal wind towards mid-month, which is quite interesting. So we go, the thick red line here in the middle is the climatological average. The thin red line at the top is the record strong, and the thin red line at the bottom is record weak. You can see here that we are above the record strong in terms of the next 10 days or so. These winds are really strong around the polar vortex, showing that it's quite strong. So this is quite interesting, right? Because we've got a strong mean zonal wind around the polar vortex, and what is coinciding with this is that would suggest a milder setup. But what is another suggestion of a milder setup is the fact that the MJO is going in through phases 4, 5 at the moment here. This is a mild signal in terms of both the mean zonal wind strength and also the MJO rotating through phases 4 and 5. So there's two reasons to believe that a milder pattern is kind of upon us, but yet we've got quite a distinctly chilly look in the 6 to 10 day period of the modelling here, and we'll get to that in just a second. So there's a little bit of confliction here. This is how things are. You can never go by one teleconnection. There's many other different aspects to consider, and obviously I'm always learning myself with regards to the way the system works, and you know, you can study it for the rest of your days and still never understand fully what's going on. This is off the GFS ensemble, by the way. Again, phases 4 and 5. These are quite a warm phase in terms of Western Europe, even Eastern North America as well. Arctic oscillation, you can see here, if we click on the Arctic oscillation, this is a measure of atmospheric pressure. The lower the pressure over the Arctic, the more the positive Arctic oscillation is present. The stronger the blocking over the Arctic is, the more negative the Arctic oscillation is. And you can see here that we're hovering, leaning more negative as opposed to neutral, but we're close to it. You can see that we're pretty much neutral at the moment here. We're expected to take a little dip through the next week or so here, then it goes back to neutral. So the AO is kind of hovering just on the weak side of negative. And if we look at the North Atlantic oscillation too, this is the measure of pressure between Iceland and the Azores. The more positive the NAO is, the stronger the Icelandic low is, the stronger the Azores high is, and the opposite takes place when you've got a strongly negative. You notice here we're going weakly positive with the NAO, so we're going to see stronger lower pressure towards the northwest of the UK. Then we go slightly negative and then go back positive again. This would make sense. This would correlate well with the stronger polar vortex and the phase 4-5 of the MJO. But you notice here, I want to show you this, and then we'll look at December in a little bit more detail. This is off the ECMWF model. Like I said, we went from mild conditions through the course of the weekend. We're back in the Arctic air once again. We've got snow on the ground in the mid to high ground at the moment. Play through the loop, we've got an area of low pressure that pulls to the east. Then we've got another little area of high pressure that settles in ahead of what will likely be a little bit of a conga line of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. And this is what I visualized when I made up not only the December outlook, by the way, but also the winter forecast as a whole, that I thought we would have more of an active jet, a fight between Azores high pressure trying to lift north, and an active jet moving across the Atlantic, trying to throw areas of low pressure towards the UK and Ireland. These little areas of high pressure, clear skies, light winds, and at this time of the year, you get cold nights. We are expecting -6, -7, -8 possible tonight, especially where there's snow-covered ground. So once that area of high pressure then moves to the east, we're starting to open the floodgates to the Atlantic, and we've got one system that moves in. We may see initial snow before slightly milder air moves in behind it. Then we've got the first real low moving up towards Iceland. So there's your positive NAO signal. Strong high pressure at 1032 millibars between the Azores and Iberia. We've got a 969 millibar low just to the south of Iceland. That is a textbook positive NAO signal here. Play through the loop. You see that frontal system moves through, wind, rain, squeezing the isobars. Then we've got another area of low pressure that develops as it moves across the UK, bringing more wet and windy conditions. Then we play through, and we've got another system moving through. But you notice, so we're starting to see colder air gathering to the north here. That system then clears through. This is by the time we reach the weekend. So we've got this clear, settled start to the week, more unsettled as we move towards the mid to late week period. That system moves through at 981 millibars, or even down to 977 millibars. Do we have the possibility of a named storm? That's something that I've been highlighting here in the channel for a good couple of weeks now, based on various parameters, including the MJO, polar vortex, and other aspects as well. I thought stronger jet. We've also got bitterly colder over North America. That then increases the strength of the Atlantic jet exit North America. So there you go. Stormier situation developing as we move through the second half of this week. Then notice here we've got an area of high pressure that shifts west, builds northwards. So therefore we're starting to pull our air in rather than northwesterly, which is what was somewhat initially thought. That high is poking its nose more all the way up towards Iceland and Greenland. Therefore we're transporting our flow in from the Arctic itself. And this here, by the way, would be quite a chilly look. 978 millibars. We could see some gales and very nasty conditions down the eastern side of the UK, southeast UK as well. But we've got a 1042 high sticking all the way up to Greenland. We've got 978 millibar low moving into the low countries here. That, if we look at the 850s, that is a pretty chilly looking airflow. And then in comes that bitterly cold air from the north. Then we start to see a little bit of an easterly. Notice here, that area of high pressure, 1042, then lifts up to the north between Scotland and Iceland, extending into Scandinavia. Then that cold air that's present over Scandinavia, over Central Europe, then that gets pulled westwards underneath that area of high pressure. This is off the ECMWF model, by the way. And then we've got something slightly milder showing up again as well. Again, I would expect that to be the case as we move towards middle month. This cold shot, by the way, is a little bit of an anomaly within itself based on the polar vortex and based on the MJO. I think this is an interesting cold spell given that it's in a warmer overall signal. That's probably the best way, hopefully, to put it. Looking at back at the overview chart here real quick and play through this loop. You can see that area high pressure, then the floodgates of the Atlantic opens up. We've got one system after another pulling through. Then the high then builds to the west of the UK, allowing that Arctic air in. Then it kind of topples its way over the top of the northern UK, east to northeasterly flow. And then the high kind of settles bang slap over the British Isles itself. And you notice here it lingers through the middle portions of the month based on the ECM model. So anyway, let's have a very quick look. I don't want to be too long-winded with today's video. There's obviously quite a lot of things to cover. But let's look very quickly at the December forecast. By the way, I'll leave a link in the description below. This is freely available. Just click on the link and you'll get to the article. There is a couple of aspects, including UK and European highlights for the month of November, still to be added. But without going through the entire article, because there's quite a lot in there, I want to just quickly show you something. In terms of the the general ideas for the first half of December is like this: Atlantic low pressure stroke jet stream versus the Azores high, followed by retrogression. So week one looks to start chilly, if not cold, followed by a wet and windy, if not stormy spell. The driving forces are stronger than normal Azores high, trying to push north, while an extended jet stream exit North America, southeast US to be exact, will spread across the Atlantic and attempt to throw lows into the UK and Ireland. So you can see this is the jet orientation for Thursday, 5th of December. This is obviously from a few days ago, but you've got that south shifted jet over the western side of the North Atlantic. Then it's pushing northwards here. We've got this high that is trying to build northwards at the same time. We've got this flow coming in off the Atlantic. The stronger jet, in consequence of the bigger contrast between Arctic air versus subtropical air. This is the upper chart here for the next 7 days. So again, this is a couple of days old, but you get the general idea. Then week two appears to see the mean ridge back westwards from the UK and Ireland, suggesting a northwesterly flow resulting in a cool, showery regime. The problem now with this is it's actually colder looking for next week as opposed to what was actually initially thought. So I'm not necessarily throwing the towel into a forecast that's only 2 days old, but nonetheless, we've got more of a direct discharge of Arctic air, but I think it's a short-lived one. So I think the ideas are generally not too bad looking. Both the ECM weeklies and the GFS ensemble all support the above week two solution. So that westward shift in the high. The golden question is this an indication of something colder and a return to a more negative AO and perhaps more so negative NAO towards the middle of the month? My beloved MJO is likely heading back towards the colder phases if the rotation continues, that is. So by day 15, the risk would be a collapse within phases 4 and 5, which the GFS ensemble may be hinting at below. In other words, if it collapses in phases 4 and 5, we may have a problem with a colder second half of December because it may get stuck with the convection over the warmer maritime continent region. But interesting enough, while we have a stretched polar vortex to end November responsible for the cross-polar flow into the United States, hence the epic flood snowfall across the Great Lakes, the polar vortex core, temperature, structure, and the mean zonal wind all point to a strengthening through much of December. But we're starting to see more of a drop-off in that strength towards the middle portions of the month. So it's going to be interesting to see. I am going to stick with my hunch and suggest we lean average, perhaps slightly above average, for December 1st through the 20th, considering strengthening PV and remembering the lag of the MJO. Even if we manage to see the upward motion return to the west and eventually the Central Pacific, there can be a week to 10 days before the atmosphere responds, and therefore we are likely talking near the week of Christmas, say the 20th onwards, for something colder in response to that MJO potentially rotating into the colder phases of 7 and 8 and the polar vortex. There's a reason why that mean zonal wind is weakening mid to late month over the Arctic region, and I think it's because it may be seeing the return of the high latitude blocking, because I actually go on to say that noting the above ACM model spread, the mean zonal winds weakened significantly through the back half of the month. Perhaps the model seeing the return of high latitude blocking and the return of a negative AO. Keep in mind that back at the end of October, I actually hesitated with the cold prospect due to the literally no model showing anything resembling a cold pattern. So I did hesitate with the month of November in terms of how warm the first half was. I thought it would take a heck of a lot for the month to get anywhere close to average, and it did so because we had quite a strong Arctic surge during the second half of the month. Then it obviously turned wet and windy at the very final days of the month. So a back and forth between mild and cold, perhaps some storminess, especially through the first 10 days, with a battle between Atlantic low pressure and Azores high pressure. Something cooler week 1 into 2, we're likely seeing that as the high backs west, but perhaps doesn't build up towards Greenland, which it looks as if it is, at least albeit temporary. So a polar maritime rather than Arctic flow, well, it's actually an Arctic flow that we're going to be seeing. The jury is very much out mid-month on, and I wouldn't want to go by the models much, especially the CFSV2, but ECNWF hints at Atlantic towards Greenland blocking, developing week 3 into week 4. I think with a slightly increased chance for a colder, frostier, and perhaps for some, snowy Christmas to New Year period. Let's say a 60-40 in favour of snowy Christmas, especially for the north. So do we have a snowy Christmas coming up based on what I've just said? That is going to be an interesting question, and we'll need to wait and see what happens. CFSV2 for the month of December from a hemispheric view is warm and wet for northwestern Europe. So you've got a negative over Greenland, Iceland, strong positive towards the Azores. That is quite a positive NAO look. In terms of precipitation, looks wetter than average and temperature warmer than average. Overall, the average to slightly above average temperatures for the UK and Ireland and Western Europe. Colder Southeast Europe, including Greece and Turkey, near average for the UK and Ireland in terms of rainfall. So we've got a back and forth first half of the month. Do we have a colder second half of the month with the presence of the MJO and the polar vortex? That remains to be seen. But that's it. I think we've covered enough for today. I hope you're enjoying the content here in the channel. Hope you were able to check out the live stream last night. It was a good one. There will be a live stream coming up this weekend, and then there's going to be a bit of a break the following weekend from the lives. But stay tuned, stay safe, and I'll see you next time with more. Bye for now.